Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to August the 10th City Council meeting. I note that we are all here in attendance, and I will ask Matt McDonald, our Director of Corporate Services, to lead us in a moment of reflection.
May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Help us to be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, always having respect for others so that we may serve the people of our city in a helpful manner and for the good of all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right. Item number 3 is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Does anyone have any items they want to declare? Councillor McCaw.
Thank you. 8B1, please, and the ensuing bylaw 2020-148.
2020-148. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? So I have a disclosure, 8B9, which is municipal bylaw enforcement officers for the Quinte Mall, as well as bylaw number 2020-155. I own a business at the Quinte Mall, and I'll be taking a conflict on that. There are no public meetings today, so I need a motion to confirm the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 27th, the special in-camera meeting of July the 6th, and the regular in-camera meeting minutes of July the 13th. Moved by Councillor Culhane, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? It's carried. And we'll move to deputations. And I see our good friend John O'Connor is here. And Mr. O'Connor, we're sorry that we got caught in the COVID pandemic. Certainly you would never have forgotten your retirement to begin with, but I think this year it certainly is something even more special. O'Connor's Jewel Box has been in downtown Belleville for 63 years and was owned and operated by the O'Connor family and John O'Connor, and was a staple, and everyone always could recognize it. I'm sorry that we didn't get to do this earlier this year. It's obviously understandable, but I'm so glad that you had the patience to be able to stay until we were able to.
Well, I did it for 49 years. What's another year?
Can I ask you to come to the microphone and actually just push the red button there if you want to come to the podium? Because I will give you a chance to speak, and that might be the perfect way for you to lead in. And
Well, I beg your pardon, Your Grace. Well, having done it for 49 years myself and my dad for many, many years before that, in the midst of COVID-19, I don't mind waiting another year. I really don't. You are forgiven. And thank you so much for recognizing all that we did. I have my friend Kim Volker here, who was my assistant, my other employee for, well, since about 1999 to the year 2000 when my dad got sick, and if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have made it through. So you're honoring her as well.
Oh, wonderful. Good. What are you planning on doing with retirement now?
Well, for a year I did this.
Okay.
And after a year went by, I started going in the other direction. Actually, no, I'm quite enjoying my retirement. It's nice not to have to worry about hearing that 3 a.m. call from alarm systems, which is something that kept me on edge for many, many, many years. Yeah. Good. I do miss it. Jewelry is a wonderful business to be in, but you get jaded after a while. Ha, 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 ha. And I would like to thank you very, very much for this honor.
Good. I have a certificate for you, but before I do it, I just want to again say thank you. You know, we're very lucky with a lot of things in our community, and the number one is our people. And you and your family, your father before you, and his contribution to the city is very, very important. We see it all the time. I was out doing a video for the city at the water treatment facility, and your dad served many years on that board and contributed just like you have. And so I'm really pleased to be able to give you this send-off. Thank you for your service to our community, and wish you all the best in retirement.
Thank you very much.
Seriously. That's good, I think.
Excellent. Congratulations again, and enjoy your retirement. Next, I'm going to ask David Fell, the CEO for Eastern Ontario Regional Network, and Jim Pine, the co-lead. This is the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, which is dealing with our improvements in telephone and internet and high-speed services, to come forward and make a presentation. Mr. Fell, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Your Worship, and members of Council. We're very pleased to be here today. I'm actually, where did he go? I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Jim Pine, who's going to give you an update on our cell gap project, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about our plans for the future for fixed broadband as well.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of Council. It's great to be back. I'm not here to speak about social housing or land ambulance, but something equally as, I hope, as important. So, yeah, as David said, we're going to split the presentation into, and I'm going to talk about our cell project.
Mr. O'Connor, you're welcome to stay if you'd like, but you can also leave. Don't feel you have to stay on our part. Thanks, Mr. Pine.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So just to hear the topics that we're going to cover in terms of the cell project and an update on it, because we're really heavily into the cell project as we speak. So Dave and I will split the project in two. But just to remind Council what our major objectives were in improving mobile coverage across Eastern Ontario, or cell coverage across the region, including our area here in Hastings and the city of Belleville. What we want to make sure is that across, the 50,000 square miles that we call Eastern Ontario, and we can get at least 99% of that area to be able to make a cell phone call. I mean, really, from a public safety point of view, it's critically important that someone can make that call if necessary. And unfortunately, we currently have large gaps around the region where you can't do that. So if you had a car accident and you were heading north on Highway 41, which I always use as an example, there's probably 60 kilometers where you better hope to be able to find a landline, because you cannot make a call. There just isn't any coverage. So that's sort of one of our primary objectives, is to make sure that there's that ubiquitous coverage across Eastern Ontario for people where they work, live, or travel. We also want to try and improve the customer experience through improved capacity in cell networks, and that's when we talk about the kinds of things like making an SD call or SD capacity, being able to do a FaceTime call, for instance, a video call across large parts of the region. We also want to improve high definition ability to use your mobile devices, whether it's a cell phone or a tablet in the region. Increase the ability of people to do that across about 85% of the region. It's much more challenging to get those higher capacities in the network, but we've set ourselves some pretty lofty goals in the project. The project itself is estimated to cost about $213 million. The money is secured, and the federal government is contributing $71 million, as you know, as is Ontario. And the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus and the Mayor's Caucus are also contributing $10 million towards the project. Then we're going to go out and raise the remaining amount from the TSPs, the telecom service providers. And we're right at the very critical point with that piece of work in terms of the telecom service providers, and we want to add capacity into the network, because it's important to be able to use your device not just to make the call, as I said, but to be able to use it for other things like mobile broadband purposes. So we're setting aside money for capacity as well. We have spent a year or more with engineers mapping where the demand areas are in Eastern Ontario, so where people live, where they travel, generally speaking, along major roads, where institutions are, hospitals, schools, all of those things have been mapped across the region. And this map illustrates the demand areas, so that it's a way for us to say how successful we are in terms of meeting the coverage and capacity requirements. But it was important for us to know. So you'll see some areas where there's white areas. There's nobody living there. There's no buildings there. There's no houses. And so there's no demand. So we've mapped those things out in terms of where we need to get to. And it's important for the people who are bidding on our projects to know where these demand areas are. So we've spent a lot of time working with detailed impact data that we've purchased in order to map out the region. We've also, of course, looked at how people travel through the region, because it's not just for people who live here, it's people who travel across Eastern Ontario to be able to stay connected or be connected in the first instance. So we've mapped the 10,000 plus kilometers of major and secondary roads that we want to make sure that there's coverage in those traveled areas. So we've done our efforts around that mapping exercise as well. And we know the municipalities are going to play a really important role in this project, because a large part of what's going to happen in the project is the construction of new cell towers to close those gaps, whoever is a successful bidder or bidders. We're going to need the Land Use Authority, which are municipalities, to be able to work with the TSPs and EORN in order to get those sites up and secured and constructed. So having tower siting plans are important in this kind of work, but EORN is committed to work with municipalities across the region to help our partners in the private sector, once we select them, in order to build those towers, lay that fiber, string that fiber, so that we can make those that infrastructure construction and improve it, and in order to close the gaps. So it's all a timing thing, and as we work through the building part, we'll be working closely with you as a city, and of course as all the other 100+ municipalities across the region, in order to get the infrastructure built. So where we're at, David, who's the CEO of EORN, has been incredibly busy, frankly. Really went into overdrive since the end of March, when we started hiring and putting into place all of the staff that we need at EORN to actually deliver the project. So David has hired engineers, accountant, cell analysts, those kinds of folks, communications people, to build out the team. I think the team is about 12, 13. So it's not huge, but they're very specialized folks who bring a lot of skill to the project. We've issued the request for proposals to the private sector to say, we want to build this project. Can you please, submit your bids? That closes on Friday, the 14th. So we're at a critical point in the project now. We're anxiously awaiting the return of the bids, and then the team will do its evaluation of those bids. It's very complex, this kind of work. And we will, at the end of the day, be able to select preferred proponents in order to negotiate the contracts with them later this fall and early into next year. The transfer payment agreement that we had to put in place with Canada and Ontario is done. All of that's in place, and that's when I said the money's secured. That's all there. And we anticipate starting building next year. And it'll take us 3 to 5 years to finish the project. It's a big effort, but you got to start and get going as quickly as we can. So we anticipate, the work getting underway early next year. And from then on, EORN has a responsibility to monitor the work that's been done and the service that's being delivered through the networks for another 10 years, right through till 2030 is our contract requirement. So we're in it for the long term to make sure that the investment's been the right investment going forward. So that's the cell project. That's the $213 million effort that we've been working on, that you've contributed to, which we certainly appreciate. And David's going to talk to you about what we want to do on what we might call the fixed or traditional broadband. Now we've got some exciting work going on there. Happy to take any questions as well, if there are any.
Well, let's go through Mr. Fell's presentation as well, and then we'll come back, because I suspect that we will have several questions.
So thanks very much for that overview, Jim, and building on that. I also want to thank the City of Belleville for being a partner on our last two projects. We didn't include all of the background information about the first fixed broadband project that we did. Certainly the City of Belleville benefited from that in terms of having a high-speed POP, point of presence, in the city. And there is a substantial amount of fiber to the home that has been built out in the City of Belleville. But even the separated cities like Kingston and Belleville and Peterborough that have very high speed, some of the rural areas within the city still don't have access to good fixed broadband. And as Jim said, it's been crazy busy trying to get this $213 million project, but COVID has really emphasized for us that we need to do more for people working at home, for students, for telemedicine and healthcare online. So we've last year put together a huge analysis on what it would take to get better fixed broadband for the region. The last slide was just an emphasis. We talk about cell or mobile and fixed, and it's important to have both of them. To participate in the modern economy, we all know we need our cell phones, not just to take calls, but to do mobile deposits, banking apps. A lot of us are using it for Zoom and FaceTime, but you can't use your phone to write a software code on. You can't develop a business plan on your phone, and you still need fixed broadband to participate in that side of the economy. So in Canada, EORN was very involved in advocating to the federal government, who is responsible for regulating the internet and telecom industry. And in 2016, the CRTC came up with a national standard. We were one of the 300 interveners in that submission, and they advocated that 90% of all Canadians should have access to 5010 by 2021. And the remaining 10% of Canadians in 10 to 15 years. Imagine getting access to the national standard, or telling your residents in 2035 you'll get the standard that most Canadians enjoy now. So like many of you, we didn't think that was good enough. We did do a very detailed engineering and economic analysis for the region in 2019. And right now, well, as of 2019, because it's changing all the time, but as of 2019, only 46% of EOWC rural homes and businesses had access to the national standard. And if we include the separated cities like yourselves that have fiber to the home, that only goes up to 63%. So we're not going to come close to hitting that 90%. That the federal government is hoping for. So what did we do? We went out and we looked at what would it cost to get 95% of the region up to the national standard. When we did our first project, many of you asked us, and you might have asked me this at a council meeting before, why didn't you just do fiber to the home last time? So in 2010, when we set off on that project, we said, anecdotally, what we heard from the industry is that project, fiber to the home for 95% of all of Eastern Ontario, would be around $1 billion. But this time we wanted to know exactly what would it cost. So we did that analysis as well. What would it cost to get a gigabit of service or fiber to the home to 95% of the population? So we use a detailed engineering model, a financial model. We built supply mapping for the region. Again, the pink or purple area is where there is demand, and the green area is where the federal government, which is through industry science and economic development, says that there is adequate service for 5010. So you can see that there's a lot of the region that does not have access to the national standard. And this helped us validate our analysis of what we thought was out there. The green is just the ISED mapping that we've put into our own system. So these are big numbers. You know, when we do that cost analysis to get 95% of the region to the 5010 standard, we think it's going to take somewhere between $500 million and $750 million. And if we were to try and go for the gig to the home for 95%, we think it would take somewhere between 1.2 and 1.6 billion. And a lot of people have come back to us and said, well, if you're doing this really detailed engineering study and you're doing the detailed economic modeling, why is the range so high? And the range is high because in Ontario, when you string aerial fiber, which is the cheapest and preferred way to go along telephone rights of way and hydro poles, the number of poles that have to be replaced is significantly higher, and it increases the cost per meter. So we know that in other provinces that we've worked in, the cost per meter to string fiber is about $15 to $20 a meter. In Ontario, it's somewhere between $30 and $40 a meter, and in southwestern Ontario, where they're doing a project, it's over $40 a meter. And that's exclusively because every time they ask to hang a strand of fiber on poles, they're told they have to replace all of those poles. On our first project, of the $175 million that we invested, $8 million of that went to replace hydro poles. So we don't think that that's a cost-effective way, and we're trying to show all levels of government that we could reduce the cost of bringing high-speed internet to people's home by changing that legislation. And we believe that the safety standards in other provinces are similar to the safety standards in Ontario. We don't think they'd have to lower those standards. So that's the ranges that we identified. And 6 months ago, if you asked me what was our chance or what was our likelihood of getting a project like this, we weren't even planning on doing this. We did the cost analysis, and we thought some of the municipalities might want to go out and apply for federal or provincial funding on their own, and they might want to do a local project. We didn't think there was an urgency for a regional project. 6 months later with COVID, the number of emails that mayors and wardens and councillors and MPs and MPPs are getting about the need to have high-speed internet at home. The Wardens Caucus has given us direction in our board that we should try to solve this for a generation. Let's not try to wait for 15 years to get the national standard. Let's go for the gig to the home. So they've endorsed that project, and we've had a number of MPs and MPPs that have supported this project across the region. Some of you may have heard about new provincial funding programs for broadband, and I wanted to include this in the slide because a lot of municipalities have asked us. There was a provincial program called ICON that was announced about 2 weeks ago. There's $150 million in that program, and they will fund up to 25% of the value of a project. It's a great program, and we're glad to see that any investment in broadband is good investment in broadband. EORN, however, won't be applying for that because our focus from our politicians has been, don't try to do this incrementally. Don't try to solve the problem just for the short term. If we're going to invest public money, let's solve it for the next generation. And there's not enough money in the program even for Eastern Ontario. The federal government has been saying that any day now they'll be announcing their new program. I believe there'll be about $1.6 billion over the first 7 years, and they're saying that it's going to trigger $6 billion in additional investments. It will be called the Universal Broadband Fund. We don't know what the criteria are because the program hasn't been released. I don't think that we will be applying to the UBF. We have a detailed business case that we've prepared, a summary of our proposal. It goes to the Wardens Caucus for final approval on Friday this week at the board meeting. But we have been advocating to both senior levels of government to go for the gig and get that solved for the region for a generation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or have my colleague answer.
Thank you. Well, if we can maybe just, because I realize that there's been an explosion of interest and demand in the last 4 to 6 months because of the whole COVID, people working at home, and it's really, I think, exposed some of our real liabilities. But if we can go back, first start off with the cell gap improvements. So when did that project first start? Because I recall being on the Quinte Economic Development Commission, going to Ottawa in 2008 to meet with then MP Darryl Cramp. John Baird was the federal minister of communication, and they were negotiating with the provincial government of Dalton McGuinty at the time he was premier. And I think that was sort of at the beginning of it. But that's 12 years ago already, where we first started having discussions about the fact that we were underserviced in rural Eastern Ontario, and then agreements were brought to municipalities to help assist with it. So in terms of the cell gap coverage, particularly for Belleville, where are we in terms of, have we seen any improvements? Are we getting close to the end of them? Are they just starting? I know that you had talked about 2021 starting construction, but where are we with that issue?
Well, you're quite right. We started working on broadband back in 2008. I remember those days. I remember being in John Barrett's office with Darryl, who was a champion for us in the first broadband project that David spoke about, the $175 million effort that we did, that we finished in 2015. And, thank goodness Darryl's still around because he's a champion for what we're doing now in terms of both the cell project and for the gig project. And the gig project, just to remember, is that's 1,000 megabits that we're talking about. And the federal government has said the minimum, or the CRTC said the minimum standard is 50 down, 10 up. We're talking 1,000. And that's why David says it's the generational fix for us. In terms of the cell project, we've been working on that since 2014. We started working on what we realized when we were doing the first project was that in terms of connectivity, people's demand for it and the ability to get access to it was an ever-changing thing, and that we had to continue to work at it. And We wanted to fix the other side, as David said, to have both the fixed and the mobile connectivity in place. So we started in 2014 and have been doing the work to get ready for where we're at today. And there have been, additional towers going up over time. We know that. We've been working with the industry all the way through in terms of our data, their data, to get to the stage where we could issue the RFP. So there's still gaps. There's capacity issues as well. So if you're in a high-density area, sometimes you may be able to get connected, but you lose the call anyway. That's a capacity problem. So we're working.
So, Mr. Pine, have we seen improvements in Belleville with respect to the Cell Gap project? Because that's now been 6 years since it started, and I know we've gone to a certain point, and I want to get back to the funding issue first, but have we seen any improvements to this point?
We haven't started building the cell project
so
yet.
2021 is when we expect to have construction.
That's right.
And I know I asked you about this before, Mr. Fell, and in terms of the schedule and where Belleville fits within the schedule. Now, if I recall correctly, you mentioned to me that will be dependent upon who is successful in getting the contract, because they will then work out a work plan.
Correct. So as Jim mentioned, the RFP closes on Friday.
Right.
And once we know we've gone through the detailed scoring and we figure out who the proponents are going to be, we'll have a schedule. So we would love to have an invite to come back when we can tell you what that's going to look like. Right now it's at a competitive process, right? So we don't know who's going to give us the best bid, what the best schedule is going to be, what the least amount of subsidy money is.
Well, we would very much like to invite you back, but we want to make sure that we are on the front end of the construction schedule for those improvements, right?
I'd like to try and promise that, but it is at the discretion of the vendors that are bidding who goes first.
I would support you in that.
Okay, appreciate it. So, Mr. Pine, you had mentioned about $10 million that municipalities have paid towards, I believe, this $213 million initial project. Now, and the City of Belleville is contributing or committed to contribute $600,000 of that $10 million. Oftentimes we get questioned about what the city is doing to help solve these problems, and that we don't care about our residents, and that we're not doing anything. Can you make a comment about whether or not this is an area of municipal jurisdiction, what role the private sector plays, and where we do have these services in other parts of the city, whether the government contributed towards those services?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that you're putting your money where your mouth is, if I can be so colloquial in my expression, that we can't fix this without an investment or improve it. And so the city is graciously joining with Hastings County and the other members of the EOWC and your 10 separated communities in terms of that municipal contribution of $10 million. And I think when you think about it as a traditional infrastructure project, which is typically one-third, 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 the local share, which is the $10 million, is certainly far less than the one-third share that you would traditionally. So we're doing very well in terms of the property tax dollars that we're having to invest in this. We're getting a good deal in terms of the project itself, because the federal government and the provincial government and the private sector is going to be investing so heavily in it. So you're doing your part, Hastings County is doing its part, and all of the municipalities around Eastern Ontario are doing their bit by supporting the project and investing in it. And our desire was to keep the property tax investment as low as possible, because typically that's not our business. That's not typically a municipal service that we provide. But like doctor recruitment, we municipalities realize that it's a necessity, it's a need, and you want to do your bit to try and help it out. And that's what we're doing on the internet side. If it was purely just for business purposes or business reasons, there's market failure. We know that people will not be able to get connected. That's why we've intervened with the projects that we're doing. It takes your support and our support to make it better for our citizens. We can't, if we just relied on the private sector, they will have to respond to their shareholders, and we know what happens as a result. So
okay.
That's why we're in.
2 years ago, on June 28th, in 2018, there was an announcement made at Signal Brewery regarding this next stage. And one of the questions that a resident has asked me to ask about is, where are we at with that, whereas it deals with broadband? So obviously, there's an RFP that closes on Friday this week, and construction of that will start in 2021, and then we'll hear about the exact schedule of which municipalities will have some of that work that will start. In terms of that very heralded announcement, the feds were there, the provincial government was there, and we're 2 years later, and I think you can appreciate that some residents are frustrated because they hear announcements being made, and we're led to believe that something's happening and it's moving along, and still today, and in the summer of 2020, we really haven't seen those improvements. So can you maybe speak to that announcement at Signal, what that was for, and where we are today as a result of it?
Absolutely, and thanks for the opportunity to clarify. So that was a federal-only funded program. It was under a project called Connect to Innovate. So Connect to Innovate, it was similar to the one I talked about, the upcoming UBF. They announced in 2016 $500 million to subsidize broadband programs. We didn't apply to it. Just to give you a sense of how big the problem is, they received $4.5 billion in applications. 4 years later, they've only given out about a third of the money, only about a third of the projects, and they're projecting about 60% of them will be completed after 5 years by March 31st next year. It's one of the reasons why we advocate for regional organizations like EORN that have boots on the street and live in the area and have to stand up in front of your council and tell you how the money's going to be spent. That's why we advocate that broadband funding goes through organizations that are dedicated to broadband funding. So we can't speak about that program. Any broadband is good broadband. It's too bad that that project hasn't moved forward more quickly.
Well, but if the money is there...
Yeah, it's not our project.
Yeah, so fair enough.
So
I think we were involved in it in some way. We were present or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess, members of the public, and I think a lot of members of council, we don't know the different organizations. We don't know the different almost silos that they're working on. We just know we need to improve these services, and it has been taking such a long time. So I guess the next question is that we're starting this next stage. The RFPs due this week. People will bid. We will go through and ensure all the bids are accurate. They understood what they were doing on they're technically sound, and you'll make an award later this year for construction to start in 2021. The timeline for that is going to be 1 to 5 years, if I heard you say correctly. So 1 to 5 years that we're at that point. Is there anything that can be done to speed that up?
Municipal councils can help with the land use approval. So if there is an application for a tower to be cited, to familiarize yourself, we'll be developing a set of guidelines to assist you. There's a very detailed, I think it's 120 pages from FCM, but we're going to try and summarize that down so you're aware of all of the issues, and certainly to support the project as it starts to roll out in terms of the ability to get those towers put up and to speed that project along. Municipal rights of way, I'm trying to think of other...
Are those going to be dependent upon the individual company that is successful in the RFP, or is there work that we can do before, regardless of who wins it, that we can expedite so that those approvals are in place even when you issue the contract?
No, we need to see who wins and where they
want to go. Okay. So we can't.
Propose,
Okay. Thank you. The last question, and I'll open it up to my colleagues. I've just joined the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus for the last year and a half, and we had received reports previously of discussions, and I know that you report, I believe, every Warden's Caucus. You did a report to the last Mayor's Caucus. There's a sense out there that municipalities aren't pushing this, that we're not fighting for our residents to improve this infrastructure, which is deemed to be essential, like we fight for road projects, or like we fight for sanitary or water projects or whatnot. Again, Mr. Pine, you've talked about this as being around since 2008, that we've been dealing with it. And I know you work for a municipality, so I want you to really be objective in this. Are municipalities doing what they can, or is there something else that we should be doing more of or differently in order to push this agenda for what we consider to be an essential service?
I think we're running as hard as we can. Frankly, and I can speak frankly, if it wasn't for EORN and the EOWC and the Mayor's Caucus saying that it was important, we'd be left to the market forces. Everything that we've done in Eastern Ontario has been community driven by leadership from the municipal sector. We're the ones that came up with the plans. We're the ones that put forward the applications. We are the ones that have managed the projects. But we're talking in this latest project, yes, we're doing the $213 million cell project, and that'll be done. But the next thing that we're doing, as David has said, is this generational move to fix broadband in Eastern Ontario for a generation. 1,000 megabits is, a gig. We have decided as municipalities to take that approach rather than saying we will accept the minimum, the 50-10. So why should our citizens expect or expect us to settle for 50-10? So we're being bold. This is a hugely bold project. I don't know of any other project in the country as big as the one that we've proposed to fix the problem for a generation. And it's your leadership, because you're supporting it. It's Hastings County. We're pushing as hard as we can, and I know that the MPs and MPs are listening. And if you continue to do what you're doing, we're going to be successful. I said to David, I can feel it in my bones. It's the right thing to do. But it's always been driven by us, and I use the royal us on this. And I don't think if we had done that all those years ago, we would be in a very good position at all. We'd be so far behind the 8 ball. But the challenge is the demand keeps growing. So we've now taken the position, let's not settle for the minimum, let's fix it for good.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, anyone else have any questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you, and thank you very much, Mr. Pine. That's fantastic. I think technology is always is increasing every year on cell technology and landline and internet in general. Just a few years ago, I think when we could only get, I think it was the first iteration of 4G in our cell phones, we could only get about 150 megabytes per second. Now with the LTE, it's about 1,000, so it's kind of sitting there. 5G, of course, has been spoken about in the media a lot, and some of our local companies are looking at it. It would reach 10,000 megabytes a second. So my question is an innovation. When we look at spending all the money over the next 5-6 years, are we keeping an eye on what will be the next step in cell? So I know we talk about, it used to be the word I heard all the time was last mile, that we'd send broadband to a certain place, and the problem always, the most expensive part was the last mile. Is there a chance that in the next 5, 6, 7 to 10 years that we're going to see that transition from broadband wired to wireless as being the way that, and I know we speak for a lot of rural customers in Belleville, but is that a chance that we're going to see that transition? That no longer are you going, because I know one of your slides said people still need that hardwire, but is there a point where we're going to see technology leapfrog and now you can tether off your phone onto your laptop, onto your tablet, and it's just as fast as hardwired?
I think that's a great question, and we get a similar question about LEOs, low Earth orbit satellites. So you probably heard Elon Musk talk about
my second question.
yeah, so we get this from ministers as well. And part of the problem in anticipating the technology and the requirements that you have is you can't anticipate the ways that you're going to use it in 5 years from now and how much bandwidth you're going to consume. So Jim and I were with a couple colleagues at the Canadian Space Summit last year, and they were talking about LEOs and different things. And one of the things we were able to try out is 3D holographic, where you can have the visualization of a piece of technology in front of you and then see the room in behind, right? That requires an incredibly high amount of bandwidth. And you think of how we've moved from having face-to-face meetings from COVID to Zoom, and how many times your Zoom calls drop, to moving to 3D visualization where you're in your house, you're not doing Zoom, you're wearing a pair of glasses, and council's sitting in front of you, and how much bandwidth that requires. And I use that as an example because I think our sense is that fixed and wireless allow you to do two different things. The capacity of fiber is always going to be higher than the capacity of transmission through radio spectrum. But going forward, people are going to need fiber to the home and very high-speed mobile, 5G, 6G, whatever. They're going to need both of those. And I think we'll need them because we can't anticipate yet all of the uses. When we started in 2010, our board chair always says, Netflix had just started in the US and it wasn't in Canada yet. And we didn't anticipate the growth in internet usage. And it's not all just Netflix and TV. Now a lot of it is for business and commerce, right? So I think going forward, investing in fiber to the home and investing in good mobile broadband. And as Jim said, we're not just building for now. When we negotiate, when we select that vendor and we award the contract to them, it's a very, trying to think of a way to describe the negotiation. It's a tough negotiation, and what we want to know is that if we fund part of that infrastructure, that over time, as these new generations of technology come in, that they're going to continue to keep investing in it. So if they build a tower and they put 4G now, that they'll upgrade it to 5G. And when 5G is done in 10 years from now and I'm retired, they'll upgrade it to 6G so that you continue to stay current.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for comments? Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, and certainly appreciate the presentation. I know myself, the mayor, and certainly Councillor Sandison, representing the rural parts of the city, we get calls all the time about internet. So this is very informative. Mayor, you had some great questions that the public was looking for, and so hopefully some answers will go out there. I guess not so much a question for the delegation here, but the Connect to Innovate program, which is separate and apart from EORN, I'm told there's $42 million, and that's to roll out this year. I guess what I'm asking for is perhaps maybe we need to contact the MP for Bay Quinte riding and ask for an update on this federal program, because they're talking about installing over 500 kilometers of fiber and 50 to 100 microcell towers, delivering up to download speeds of 100 megabytes per second and uploads of 15 to 30. That's not generational like 1 gig, but I know a lot of residents that would do backflips for this. That money is already allocated, but it sounds like we're not hearing much about that program. This program, in conjunction with EORN, should saturate the area, at least provide some service at various levels. The 1 gig service for a generation is obviously the Cadillac version that we should be striving for. But in the interim, this program here has been rolling out, or was to roll out. I guess just getting an update. I know it's ExploreNet that was, I think, given that contract. They do a lot of towers. Just getting at least an update from the federal government as to where this program is and how far along would help. Also, while this program takes the 3 or 4 years to roll out.
So, Mr. Fell, can you comment on that? Because obviously you're our point organization when it comes to these projects. I know that there was a provincial project that you said you weren't going to be applying for because it doesn't fit what we're doing. This Connect to Innovate project, which I think is a COVID-related item. I know at least the feds have made an announcement that COVID has caused them to reconsider their investment, and they're now rushing out some additional announcements about money. What's your direction in terms of what we should be doing with that program?
I think it's a great suggestion to check in with your MP on the status of that project. And you did ask us what could you do to help. We did have a letter writing campaign from wardens and mayors to Minister Scott, the Minister of Infrastructure in Ontario, and Minister Monsef, the Minister of Rural Affairs for the federal government. We also had very strong letters of support talking about the application of broadband from the CEO of Loyalist College, from Fleming College, from businesses throughout the region. The Wardens Caucus and the Mayor's Caucus did a survey through the Leadership Council of 250 businesses to ask them what did they need in turn. 57% of them said better broadband access for us so that we can sell our products online, and for our customers so they can buy our products online. So any letters of support for our gig project, we'd be happy to send templates and examples to you for that.
Okay. Anyone else for comments on this? So one more question that came from our residents, and we have some very informed and active residents who understand that different provinces have got different, some municipalities are actually in this business in other places in Canada, and you know, challenging us to do better. But the one question that they've had, which I think is a very good one, is that it's all well and fine to be doing what we're doing now. But should a second wave strike and the move to have children go back to school, having them have to stay home again with a system that is not capable of supporting the demands for students at home, people working from home while they can't do that. Is there any, what would you say that we can do or have any strategies in the short term that we can deal with that? Because for some of them, we can talk about a 1 to 5 year project, but the reality is that November this year or next February may be a time when they are incapable of having their kids participate in class. So what should we do in the meantime?
I wish I had a good answer for that. Internet infrastructure is costly and it takes time to build it. And I think we've, for quite a few years, haven't come to the table. And you asked about that, you know, what can we do and what are we doing? And I think what Jim talked about, the market failure issue, like these are big companies that operate in the private sector. They're profitable companies. If you have RRSPs, you probably have stock in them. And in the areas where they haven't built it yet, it's because they will lose money, right? We can't force private companies to go and lose money by providing a service that is going to, so that's why we do the market failure analysis. And what we try to use that for is to say, what's the minimum amount of public money that we can take to stimulate the maximum amount of private investment to get the service that people need? Because I don't think it's not a question anymore of whether or not people need it. Every single program to recover from COVID, whether it's education, healthcare, or business, requires online access. So if the government is going to spend billions of dollars to help the economy recover, they really need to think about broadband as one of the key. You can support all the economic growth you want, and if you don't have a road to get there, it's not going to help.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming. If you want to send those templates to me, and I'll get each of us around the table will send our own letters in to ensure that there's that support for it. And we appreciate you being here. If members of the public have questions, you know, further questions about just seeing they want to see the presentation, they want to sort of dig in a little deeper prior to you awarding this RFP. But if they have questions, what's the best way for us to get that information to them?
Please stay tuned on our website. We have a new website. It's www.eorn.ca. And as we start making announcements, those will be posted on the website. We're developing a regular newsletter. And the mayor mentioned we've always gone to the EOWC board meetings. Only in the last sort of 6 months have we been regularly invited to the EOMC. As soon as I did my presentation, the mayor was the first one to jump on and say, will you come and talk to our council? So we have a great communications team, and we're building more and more materials. Each one of our board meetings has a little summary that gets sent out, so those can be distributed to your councils. But encourage the public to go to our website and sign up for the newsletters and updates as they come out.
Thank you. No, this is a priority for us, and as we've said, you've said, our residents, we don't have two classes of residents. They all need to have this service. They all should be able to enjoy their properties, be able to learn like other people in the rest of the city, operate their businesses like other places in the rest of the city, and to have confidence about the future. So thank you for coming. When you make a decision on the awarding of the contracts, we are very interested to know the schedule for upgrades in the city of Belleville, and you are welcome to come back at that point.
Thank you very much.
You.
We look forward to it.
All right, so I have a resolution that the deputation by David Fell, CEO, and Jim Pine, co-lead for the Eastern Ontario Regional Network regarding this project be received. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor, it's carried. And I've noted that Mr. McDonald will be reaching out to MP Ellis regarding more information on the Connect to Innovate program and what the City of Belleville needs to be doing to ensure that some of that investment is here. Okay, good. Thank you. I hope the residents felt that their questions were asked and they got more information, and that they understand that this is not something we're taking lightly. This is a frustrating process for everybody, but it's on its way. Thank you very much, everybody. Next item is correspondence, and it's the Integrity Commissioner Services, the annual report for 2019. And I have a resolution that the Integrity Commissioner Services Annual Report 2019 be received. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Kelly. So this information was distributed and posted on the website on Friday with the agenda. Discussion. Councillor Sanderson, if I can just ask you to stand, please.
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I'd like to make an amendment to the resolution. And the amendment would read that the Integrity Commissioner Services Annual Report 2019 be received, and that the contract with Cunningham Swan and Mr. Tony Fleming be terminated effective immediately.
Point of order.
Okay, just a second. So Councillor Sanderson's making that amendment to his motion. Councillor Kelly, are you in agreement with that as a seconder? I'll second that. Okay. So, point of order, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, to Your Worship. And just listening to the amendment, I have three issues with that. One, I don't think it fits the spirit of what this letter is. I know that the councillor asked for a contract last week. We don't have that in front of us, so terminating a contract that we don't have with us just doesn't seem right. Number two, we have a notice to motion today to deal with this Integrity Commissioner in training. So again, without having training and going out to cancel a contract doesn't make any sense. And for number three, I think this is the most important one. It seems in this report there's 3 active investigations. So I don't know if it's very ethical that we be looking to terminate a contract when there's investigations going on current councillors and maybe perhaps the mayor in this room. So okay. I think for those points, I think this should be a notice to motion, not under amendment. Thank you.
So point of order is being raised by Councillor Williams. So I'm going to rule that it's not a point of order. The first concern that was raised, that it doesn't fit the spirit of the report, doesn't apply to whether or not the motion is able to be put before us today. The fact that there is a notice of motion later on dealing with a similar item, again, doesn't affect the fact that this motion is able to be put at this point. And whether or not there are active investigations or not is also not relevant to the motion that's before us at this point. Depending on how council acts on it, will have implications, and we'll take at that point. Councillor Sanderson, you have the floor on discussion of the amended motion.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So, first let me say I was troubled by the discussion at our previous council meeting. And so I took the time to do a little bit of investigation and to see if other municipalities were having similar struggles. And so I came upon an article that I want to just quote from part of it. So one of the foremost experts in Ontario municipal governments is a fellow named Andrew Sackton. He's a Western University political science professor. And the majority of the majority of complaints to integrity commissioners are political grievances between councillors. Doesn't that sound familiar? He went on to say, I've been struck by the number of cases where the system has not quite worked out the way people originally intended. It's not clear to me that we're better off with integrity commissioners. So the integrity commissioner This is again Sancton still speaking. The Integrity Commissioner system was designed to offer some solutions for members of council who aren't behaving properly, but you wind up having a new set of problems. While the system has obvious flaws, Sancton said there aren't obvious or easy solutions. So that said, it is a requirement of the Ontario Municipal Act that we have an integrity commissioner. Strategically, I think we would have been better off with someone in the role that had a municipal background and knowledge instead of a lawyer. I would also have liked to have seen a flat fee structure, and maybe that's something we can do going forward, rather than an open checkbook. So in my opinion, we have not been well served by the current Integrity Commissioner. Of the 3 reports provided to Council against Councillor Kelly McCaw, Councillor Pat Cohane, Mayor Mitch Panchuk, and Councillor Ryan Williams, none measure up to a reasonable expectation of investigation, and all of them are flawed. Of the 3 reports pending, the Integrity Commissioner offers that they are complaints, in his words, received in 2020 or delayed due to other factors. So if in fact they're received in 2020, they do not belong in a 2019 annual report. So from my viewpoint, he can't even get an annual report right. And whatever is meant by delayed due to other factors, I have no idea what that means. Why doesn't he spell those factors out? This Integrity Commissioner is supposed to be open and transparent. So at the end of the day, it is a process that's required, and we are following the process, and the majority of council decides on how we want to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Millette.
Your Worship, sorry, I'm just getting used to this. I'm not going to support the motion. The comment was that he's made a lot of errors. The way I'm seeing it is, and it's quite simple, I covered court for a lot of years. Because we didn't like the verdict of the judge, we want to fire the judge. I think what we're seeing here is that we didn't like the findings that Mr. Fleming has brought, so let's get rid of him and shop around for a new judge. We could ask Mr. Fleming a lot of these questions, and Councillor Thompson, I believe, has a notice of motion, but if we end up walking Mr. Fleming to the door right now with this motion in its form at the beginning of the meeting, we'll never get a chance to hear from the man other than when he was at the podium when we hired him. So I just can't, I have a lot of trouble with a number of reasons for this, and I just can't get behind it. I mean, I don't agree with shopping around for a judge we like, and I would also like to hear from the man himself before we walk him off the plank. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a motion coming up, and it was noted by you to have Mr. Fleming come to the podium and have the opportunity to ask some questions. But if you look through the report, I think we're taking step 5 before we even got to step 2. By trying to dismiss Mr. Fleming now with 2 reports still outstanding, we haven't had a chance to speak to Mr. Fleming and get the questions that so many of us have for this gentleman. And second of all, if you look through the report, and specifically on page number 7, it states, any member to challenge the findings of the report undermines the integrity of the process and the conclusion of the report. That type of action is unfair to the complainant or the application of the member and the witnesses, and is beyond the scope of council's authority under the Municipal Act. And we did that not long ago when we had a report from Ms. Hunt's on one of the complaints. So now we are We're not happy with Mr. Fleming's report, so we go to Ms. Hunt and get a report which is against the rules of the Integrity Commissioner. We dismiss Mr. Fleming now when you have not had a motion, when we have a motion on the floor to bring Mr. Fleming here to defend his report. So if we're going to dismiss Mr. Fleming, why wouldn't we have Mr. Fleming here now? And I see somebody smirking a little bit, but you know, these things are serious. And if we're going to do it, let's bring the gentleman here. Let's stand in front of him and say, Mr. Fleming, we don't like your report. Then we've had his report. He's defended his report. We've had a chance to ask him questions. Then if we're not happy, then let's dismiss him. But we're going to step 5 before we even got to step 2. Reports may not be what we want. We've had a number of reports. The one that we had to discipline to, council voted against not to discipline. The other ones, we had no discipline, and we all accepted those. And I'm sure some would prefer not to go that way. But this is totally, totally wrong. Doing this at this stage of the game. The motion, I put the motion on the floor, notice the motion a week ago or 2 weeks ago that this was going to be today. Then all of a sudden the report came. Now this is on for correspondence. Now we want a motion to amend it to replace Mr. Fleming. And through this, you know, we can debate all his findings. And we can debate through this report here on Mr. Fleming on a couple of 3 occasions. If you go to page 4, where possible, they attempt to resolve the dispute informally without necessity or investigation or inquiry. Every one of those investigations were a conflict of interest or something that was serious enough to conduct an investigation. So to say to him, we don't like your report, we don't like your cost of doing business, then why would we even have an IC commissioner? By the government, they say we got to have it, so let's use it. And then there was a statement made the last meeting that a councillor was going to bring another complaint. Well, if we're going to bring complaints, then we better be ready to have an IC commissioner, be ready to pay the bill, and be ready to accept what actions is in there. And we're not doing that, and we're totally wrong with 2 left to come in. And if we want to, let's bring them here, let's get some discussion with them, let's get some answers. Or are we scared to bring them here? Are we scared that it's going to be a bit of a show by some councillors or whatever, with him on the podium, some against, some for, because we have had reports here that we're not happy with? We got to stop this, bring that gentleman here. That's our job. We hired him. Let him give us a chance to defend himself. Then if we're not happy, then we can do it. But we're doing it in the wrong way tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Before I go to the next one, Councillor Sanderson, I see you wanting to respond to it. You will be given the opportunity to speak last, as it's your motion. You know, again, just because people have an opinion doesn't mean that they're right, and I know that you wanted to correct some statements perhaps, and I may comment on them when it's my turn, but we do have the ability to have our say around this table in terms of that. Councillor McCaw.
Thank you, through you. First, I'll just respond to the comment about being afraid to have Mr. Fleming come here. I can tell you I'm not scared of anyone. In fact, I'm fearless about anything. So I could care less whether he comes here. There's a lot of reasons why I will support Councillor Sanderson. There's been many discrepancies right from the way two separate investigations have been conducted. One was based on a balance of probabilities, yet another was not based on a balance of probabilities. We have another investigation with a failure to call key witnesses in connection with an investigation, which, why I can't even answer that, and I don't even need an answer. It's just failure to do your job. I have a grave concern about council members seeking advice from the Integrity Commissioner and then asking the Integrity Commissioner to rule on that advice. If that advice is wrong, he's not ruling against himself. I can assure you that in itself is a conflict of interest. We've had a letter from our lawyer clarifying a statement made by the Integrity Commissioner that we as council members do not have the right to question our Integrity Commissioner. Well, if I am going to answer to the people of Belleville who have questions, I will question anyone I feel like. And there is no integrity commissioner or anyone that's going to tell me otherwise. That's my job, to question and investigate, and it doesn't matter who it is. I've heard of another instance in another municipality that does not sound good to me with the same integrity commissioner. I'm not going to get into that at this point, but I understand there is another issue out there. We have rulings against the mayor, which then go back to staff, that cannot be substantiated. We have, the fact that we're having this discussion at all, tells us that something has to change and something's not right. The fact that we have any doubts, there's one doubt in this room, just one of us doubt it. We need to look at another way or another person, and nobody's suggesting that we do not have an integrity commissioner, but we need to be comfortable with who we're dealing with. And there's enough question already I'm hearing in this room that tell me we're not comfortable. So as it stands now, I'm going to support Councillor Sanderson for those reasons, and I'm sure there are many more, but I've talked long enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culhane. Councillor McCaw. Councillor Culhane and then Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Your Worship. I spoke to this at great length at the last council meeting, and I meant every word that I said. I will reference Councillor Millett's statements, not supporting because we didn't like the verdict of the judge, so we fire the judge, or don't agree with shopping around for a judge that we like. Personally, I take great exception, with respect, to those comments, because in no way, shape, or form do I support shopping around for an opinion that we like. I have grave concerns. This process is mandated. We didn't ask for it, we were given it. We have no choice but to use it. This entire fiasco is based on the fact that some of us refuse to sit down and talk to others like adults in a direct and honest fashion. We can't mandate that behavior, but we can certainly ask for it. My concerns with Mr. Fleming, I will discuss with the Law Society because that is a process open to me. Mr. Fleming himself referenced complaints received in 2020 that were, and I quote, delayed due to other factors. The details of those other factors will be known. They will be known. Interference in this process is not acceptable by anyone, and implying that any of us have a mindset or predetermined some kind of malice against Mr. Fleming is incorrect, and again, I take great exception. Mr. Fleming had a job to do, and I agree with Councillor Sanderson, we need someone with greater municipal scope and greater understanding of the undercurrents and the problems that we have. They're not simply our problems, but they will be dealt with honestly, to the best of my ability. I speak for myself. I'm not implying anyone else isn't honest. I'm simply saying I do not accept Mr. Fleming's conclusions, at the risk of repeating myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Culhane. Councillor Kelly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I'm glad we're actually having this discussion tonight about the Integrity Commissioner. I watched a couple of weeks ago what went on here in City Council, and my thoughts are my thoughts. I think this is our own undoing. We've put ourselves in this conversation, whether we like it or not. Fire the judge. Game changes. Why are we making changes? I've heard those comments tonight. We're not firing the judge, and people make changes in the game all the time. Being an old sports guy, we made them all the time. A few days ago, I reached out to a former councillor and had a conversation with this person. And being a rookie councillor, I was leaning on this individual to just kind of reflect on my coming up in 2 years. And I talked about the Integrity Commissioner and how I feel it's been very disruptive on the 4th floor of City Hall. This individual told me that they spent, in their over 10 years of service, $700 on legal opinions. And that was in the last 1.5 to 2 years of this person's term, which was not that long ago. So think about it. He spent $700, and it was out of his pocket, not the taxpayers. They're the forgotten individuals in all this. What are we at, $60,000 today? Think about it. It's not about who's on what side for me on this. Enough's enough. So we're going to do a little reflection. It's interesting that Councillor Sanderson brought up the Western University professor, because I tracked him down too. And you're right. He is the lead on municipal government in Ontario and dysfunction with integrity commissioners. The IC that represents Belleville, according to my research, is involved with 45 municipalities in the province of Ontario. I read this report that we went through, and it refers to Belleville as, on page 3 of the report, 295817, and some will call it out a typo. I don't. We're paying this individually handsome money. The township's code of conduct. Are we in a situation now with 45 municipalities that I read that we're just in a cut and paste because we're hearing another story from another municipality? We talked about Hotelgate. I was involved with that. I may have had a different take than Councillor Culhane, but I didn't receive a phone call from the Integrity Commissioner. I was involved with that. I would have handled it differently. But at the end of the day, he didn't reach out to the other individual on council that had their hotel rooms changed. Nobody reached out to me. So how thorough is the IC doing for $60,000 a year? If you do some more research on the IC that has a strong connection to Belleville, we go to our community up north in Elliott Lake. I don't know if you've been following what's been going on up there, but it is a disaster. That municipality, 10,800 people, has already spent in 2 years, are you ready for this? $374,631. And what does it come back to? Infighting amongst councillors. That's what they're doing up north. It's embarrassing to all of us across the province. Do some other research recently. There's a lady by the name of Praveen Senthanam. She's with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Here's what she has to say about Bill 68 as she talks throughout the province with different municipalities. This is the ministry speaking. While integrity commissioners conduct their work in an independent manner, municipalities may wish to work with them to pursue opportunities to reduce costs. This could include options for informal complaint resolution, policies for screening out frivolous complaints, reviewing the local code of conduct, and contractual and fee structures with the IOC. So working with municipalities. You know, we put us here tonight for this conversation. We really did. It's kind of ironic that the integrity commissioner is being used to attack each other's integrity. I am going to support this for a change. And with a reset, my notes are reset, restart. Let's move in a different direction, but at the end of the day, we could still have this conversation if we're going to run after another individual and call he or she out. I've watched this patiently in the back for the last 1.5 years. All I'm asking is my colleagues, and I have respect for everyone here, let's raise the bar. It's $60,000 today. Do we want to be the next Elliott Lake at $347,000 in 2 years? Let's look at the good things that have happened in the last 2 weeks here in Belleville. We just had a hotel open up on Wallbridge Loyalist Road, employing 30 people. I went by there the other night, it was packed. Last week we had the mayor and MP and the MPPs and government officials, a minister here with the Bell Boulevard. Avondale work being done. Stanley Park, kid-friendly park, families there. I was there for the opening. That's all the engaging stuff. That's what we should be taking and leaving from here and saying, this is what we helped out today. How do we help that family or individual? But what does it come back to? Count them. Since we've been back here on the 4th floor, this is our 3rd meeting, 6 weeks. Tony Fleming, I'm at the point that I think he's a councillor. Those are my thoughts, so I'll be supporting the motion. I'm glad to back Councillor Sanderson. It's time to move on for a refresh, restart.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Carr.
Thank you. So when I go back and look at the Director of Corporate Services report on March 11th, and this was the report in which we accepted the RFP from Cunningham Swan, there is a bunch of assessment criteria that's looked at, and we actually ended up with 4 different bidders. And we look at company profile, investigation experience, general municipal experience, knowledge of Ontario municipal law, public relations and education. There was a reference on a pass-fail basis, financial, and interviews if required. So we've had staff evaluate on that criteria with 4 RFPs, and Cunningham Swan was the law firm that we ultimately accepted. I have some remarks, but before I do, I just want to get clarification, because when council voted on this, it was a 2-year term with the agreement option to extend additional 1-year terms for 3 years. So I guess my question is, through you to the city clerk, is there a clause in the agreement that allows for mutual termination, or is there going to be costs, or are we going to put ourselves into a position where we may face a breach of contract?
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, regarding the question about termination, can we terminate this contract, and what under what basis?
Through the chair to Councillor Carr, my understanding is that the contract that the city has with the Integrity Commissioner is at the city's discretion with no cost. Okay.
So, and that's a good point that needs to be considered, and certainly wasn't mentioned earlier. So I want to touch on that. I don't know if sometimes I'm on city council or if I'm on The Apprentice, and we just can't fire everybody that we don't like, right? But that seems to happen a lot here. You know, I've heard some comments, and I think there's some general consensus here, though. We can all agree the legislation is flawed. It's been said. And it was said here tonight when Councillor Sanderson made the amendment, and it was repeated around the room. The legislation is flawed, okay? People putting in complaints, at the end of the day, they're affidavits. It's the same as being sworn in front of a judge. And I don't think that's taken seriously. So then, in addition to that, the investigation, and if you haven't been trained in investigations, you know, you can be very subjective after a while, but you have to take an objective view. Having somebody that's extended outside of the city, that has no involvement, no connection to the city, and the fact that this individual or this law firm is engaged with 45 other municipalities says there must be some reputable nature to that company. Our own staff scored them first amongst 4 other applicants. You know, there's a lot of emotion going on here, and there's been a lot of hand-wringing, there's been a lot of pontificating, and I'm going to say this very clearly once about me. I have not submitted one complaint. I have not sought legal advice. So with all the hand-wrangling about costs, this guy and this seat has spent 0. Okay? So I want that clear. My concern is that we've got too much emotion and not enough fact. And you could hear it around the table. And at the end of the day, we have a performance issue, by the sounds of it. A councillor here raised whether or not we're getting templated versions. Okay? Valid point. But if we had any other consultant doing any other business with the city, we don't terminate. And I've been in this place long enough that we've had some contracts on the engineering side where we've had problems, and I can point to a road up on just beyond Walmart as a prime example that there was some issues with that contractor that delayed that contract by a year. Okay? But that consultant came back and continued to work. They were pulled in and they were dealt with staff as expected. And what I'm hearing here is a lot of emotion, a lot of hand-wringing about a lot of different things. Take that out and look at the facts. And if there's a performance issue, then we get the man here and we talk about the performance. Our staff ranked this company first. So did our staff do it all wrong? Did they do their homework wrong? You know, to suggest that we need somebody that is not a lawyer but has a municipal background, you might want to take a look at that law firm. They have some pretty reputable lawyers with some extensive municipal experience. And again, when you're doing investigations, and I'm trained in doing them in my role, I can tell you that you've got to take the subjectivity out of it and look at it from an objective point of view. You have to remove yourself. And that's easy to do when you're not connected. What's hard is when you are connected and you're reading the report, because then the emotions and the subjectivity comes about, and it certainly has been shown here today. I'm not going to support the motion just simply because I think it's a knee-jerk reaction, and I think it's not responsible, in my opinion. Is that we need to look at this from a factual point of view. We need to look at this from a performance point of view. So we can have Mr. Fleming attend here. That request had gone out some time ago. And that request, and the only reason why that request didn't follow through was due to scheduling because of Christmas and into the new year, and then COVID hit. But, you know, and the fact that my member opposite, or my colleague opposite here, has a motion to have him come, well, the invitation's still out there. The fact that we don't want the guy here is concerning, because I think there's some valid questions that need to be asked, and putting the person or the firm that we have a contract with and ask those questions is a good start. And then as a result of that, should we find out that, okay, this is not going to be solvable and we're going to see ongoing problems, then I can certainly understand that we may need to reevaluate. But simply to tear apart a report of which, at the end of the day, we're all laypersons around the table reading these things, okay? And then on top of that, not hearing from him, we're not getting the full picture. So we terminate, and then what do we do then? Well, we'll go out and we'll find somebody else, or we'll take, I guess, the second best on the list here. Again, my concern is that we need to hear from him. We need to deal with the performance issue if that's the case. Number two, we have to advocate to the province to fix this. It's been said around the table, and the experts that have been quoted is that this is just a retaliatory tool that's being used by council. And clearly you could probably find examples. But it's not even council members on council members. It's probably somebody in the community that has an axe to grind, nothing else to do. And if you put a sloppy affidavit together, you can pay your fee and away you go. But that's a problem too. So at the end of the day, we've got two problems. We have a performance issue and we've got a legislation issue. And we can tackle those on two fronts. But simply to say that, you know what, it's cost us lots of money, we're firing these things around, we don't like the answers, we don't like the responses, we don't like how it looks, let's just gas the guy and move on, that's not due diligence. And where I come from, you got to investigate it all, you have to do your due diligence, then you make a decision. But today, there's way too much emotion around this table to make a good decision. So I won't be supporting this motion.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Carr. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too won't be supporting this motion. You know, I spoke, I think, I was the only one I spoke on our first integrity curature file. I think we spent about 1/3 of our council on it. But it was just on the simple fact that one of the recommendations was on training. Training. Why do we have integrity commissioner? To uphold our code of conduct. We all have said an oath when we came into council, and we have a code of conduct that we follow, and it's pretty simple. I know that Councillor Carr said it best one meeting. He said if you don't want to deal with integrity commissioners, follow the rules, right? And I think the problem has been Perhaps some of it being it's a new process, and of course, we can go back and forth on why we've seen the Integrity Commissioner more in the last year. But it's simply that, to my feeling, we haven't had the training, we haven't had the education through the process to make sure that we are following rules. We don't have to use city taxpayer money to make sure that they're rectified. The first Integrity Commissioner complaint was harassment and abuse, which you could not do in the back room. And we could not handle it as a council. Believe me, we tried. Tried it 3-4 times. Didn't happen. At the end of the day, it was the only way we could get that through to council and to find a solution. Now, unfortunately, and council has the right to debate and accept or refuse those recommendations, but that just is what it was. And one of those recommendations, one of the most important ones I felt, was training. It was recommended the mayor get training, but to my point, I said it long ago, we all need training. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, Mr. Councillor Garnett's motion, Thompson's motion, to bring the Integrity Commissioner here today fulfilled at least that we'd have a little bit of training. We'd have questions we can answer. So yes, some of this hopefully would settle down and we find a rhythm. No matter who we have it feels today like Mr. Councillor will be gassed and let go. No matter what we do today, we're still going to have to deal with an Integrity Commissioner. And as much as we think we're going to find a better one, and hopefully maybe we can find someone we all agree with, at the end of the day, they're still going to do one thing only: uphold the code of conduct that we're all here and we're supposed to be abiding by. And hopefully, no matter who it is, we're still going to need one thing. We're still going to need training. So no matter what happens today, and I'm really disappointed that we couldn't find some training, we couldn't speak to Tony Fleming, and that's fine. That's the decision of council. No matter what, I'm hoping that no matter who we hire in the next round, we also include the prerequisite of training, that we all can answer questions, that we can all make sure that we find out and absorb all the information we can with this new process, and in doing so, save the taxpayers a lot of money and a lot of hardship, and then we move on as a council and do, as Councillor Kelly said, a lot of the other great things that are happening in the city that we're responsible for, and that's it. So let's get some training, and hopefully we can move on.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Before I recognize Councillor Sanderson to wrap up discussion on this, I have a couple questions and I'll make some comments. But first of all, under Section 2.2 of the contract cancellation with the contract with Cunningham Swam and Mr. Fleming, it says very clearly, the city shall have the right, which may be exercised from time to time, to cancel any uncompleted or unperformed portion of the work or part thereof without cause or fault. And then it further goes on to talk about the fact that if the city terminates the assignment, it is entitled then to, one, take possession of all work in progress and finish the work by whatever means the city may deem appropriate under the circumstances. And so in follow-up to Councillor Carr's question about whether or not we're able to do this, it seems to me, Mr. McDonald, that we're quite able to do it. But Councillor Thompson raised the question about a status of any current investigations that the Integrity Commissioner may be undertaking, and I know he references that in his report. So when it says that the city shall take possession of that work, under the Act, we're required to have an Integrity Commissioner who's dealing with this. Can you just explain, if we were to terminate his services, what would be the process with those, either the two or more contracts that are ongoing now? Or, sorry, investigations that may be ongoing now?
Through the mayor to all of council. So if council makes a determination this evening to terminate the contract for service with Cunningham Swan and Mr. Fleming, I will certainly be in correspondence with him this evening, advise him of that, that we've used the clause in the contract. I will ask for him to cease any investigations ongoing and seal the records and send them to my office, after which, as has been stated this evening as well, we are statutorily obligated to have an Integrity Commissioner, so we'll immediately begin the search to at least temporarily have someone fill that role for us, and either that person or whoever ultimately fills that seat would be able to resume those investigations if they so chose. The other small piece that council needs to consider is this firm under contract also fulfills our closed meeting investigator, another statutory office. So termination of the contract for service would default us to the ombudsman as of termination. So I'd be in contact with that office as well, identifying that we are now under their jurisdiction for closed meeting investigator services.
So in terms of the active investigations, if there are any, they could be handled in between while council does go, or while the city goes through a process of identifying people to fill the role in the future.
Through the mayor, again, for all of council, the Act clearly states that a municipality must engage an individual for the provision of integrity commissioning services. It lists a number of services that that office will provide. It also provides that a municipality may task an individual with a number of them and may contract out other ones to another individual. If you don't appoint one, it says that a municipality may contract with a neighboring municipality's integrity commissioner for the provision of service. I would suggest in the short term, I will be reaching out to our colleagues if council decides to go down this path tonight and seek contact information for theirs on an interim basis until we can bring back a process to bring candidates to council for consideration at a later date with a larger, more robust process.
Okay. So just because I think that's important to know that simply because not using Mr. Fleming doesn't mean that we don't have someone that will be fulfilling that role. The second part, which I think was important, was that the closed meeting investigations, if members of the public should have concerns about the matters that we deal with in camera, someone to investigate that will default to the Ontario Ombudsman. Does the Ontario Ombudsman play that role for other municipalities now? Are you aware?
Through the mayor to all of council, certainly the Ombudsman's office, at the time of the amendment to the Municipal Act, giving that office the ability to fulfill that role, there were a number of the 444 municipalities that rather than engaging a individual or a firm for that service, defaulted directly to the Ombudsman's office. So yes, there are a significant number.
And then lastly, are we able to take that back from the Ombudsman and give it to a closed meeting investigator if we wish in the future?
Through the mayor, certainly if we determined that it was our collectively council's wish to have a individual or a firm contract for service for a closed meeting investigation, yes, we could opt back to that to that provision.
Good. Mr. McDonald, are you aware of any other integrity commissioners in Ontario that have been terminated by their councils?
Through the mayor, not specifically, but yes, certainly the clerks groups in Ontario and specifically the city solicitor and clerk in the city of Ottawa are tracking integrity commissioners and decisions. So there are certainly a lot of municipalities since the advent of this office, as has been referenced by members here tonight, that are struggling with the legislation and the provision of the service by those individuals that they've chosen. So there has been significant turmoil. There are a number of municipalities that have relieved the initial individual that was chosen, and there are a number of other municipalities that are in a similar situation as this council that are unhappy with the service provider at this time.
So, you know, I guess the impression is being given by some that, you know, like we're the only ones that would be doing it. It's safe to say that that's clearly not the case. There have been a number, and when we say a number, we're talking about a large multiple number of integrity commissioners that have been terminated by their councils.
Yeah, without knowing an exact number, I'd struggle to give you, to kind of quantify or give you a scope, but certainly in dealing with Clerks Association and in dealing with the ministry who house this legislation, there are certainly concerns with the way the legislation and the Office of the Integrity Commissioner is being used and the satisfaction of councils with the work of integrity commissioners across the province.
All right. And then the last question I guess I have for you, and you know, certainly, well, actually, I don't have to ask you the question, Mr. McDonald. I can just refer to it. I was contacted by the Reeve, the mayor of the Wollaston Township, who had Mr. Fleming as their previous integrity commissioner, and she contacted me to talk about the fact that they had terminated his services. So he's already been terminated by some municipalities in the past for the investigations, and she spoke to me about concerns about the weaponization of that office and his involvement with it, and also the fact that after termination, he continued to take complaints and bill the municipality for them afterwards. So, you know, that's important information for us to have. I have some comments on this, and I think that, you know, they are not emotional comments, and I think they are fact-based comments. But it starts off with, I think, recognizing that our council has made several very good decisions that have advanced the interests of the citizens of Belleville since we assumed our responsibilities almost a year and a half ago. But not every decision has worked out, and the sign of a good council is to recognize when we have made a mistake, to be open and honest about it, and then to take corrective action. This, unfortunately, is one of those cases. From my perspective, I see several fundamental problems with how Mr. Fleming has performed his duties since we appointed him to advise council. One of the comments made about the fact that he is a judge. He is no such thing. The Integrity Commissioner is there to advise council on what council shall decide what to do. It is not the decision of the Integrity Commissioner, and that is where this idea about shopping judges, you know, we are the ultimate judges. We're the ones who make the decision with the recommendation of the advice of the Integrity Commissioner. You know, unfortunately, we've had some issues. From my perspective, I see several fundamental problems with how Mr. Fleming has performed his duties, problems that threaten to undermine the public's trust in the role of an Integrity Commissioner to objectively review complaints and consistently apply the same investigative process, problems in the consistent application of the same interpretation of our Code of Conduct and the Municipal Act, and problems with objectivity, fairness, and equity, which must always be on full display in an Integrity Commissioner. Otherwise, the credibility of the role is called into question as it is now. While the provincial government has not provided a complete set of rules regarding how Integrity Commissioners should conduct investigations, one would hope that an Integrity Commissioner would at least exercise common sense and fairness in every investigation. Yet in the ones Mr. Fleming has undertaken so far on behalf of the City of Belleville, there are multiple instances where he neglected to interview several key individuals that any reasonable person would see as central. At our last meeting, Councillor Culhane accurately pointed out that while Mr. Fleming provided an extensive 10-page report on what has become known now as the Hotelgate controversy, he did so without interviewing 3 of the 4 council members who had first-hand knowledge of the situation. Does this make any sense? How would we feel if the authorities were performing an investigation knowing that there were 4 witnesses to a situation, but they decided only to interview 1? Sloppy investigative work undermines the credibility of an Integrity Commissioner's report. Quality of work is also paramount, and unfortunately also an issue here. Mr. Fleming acts as the Integrity Commissioner for many other cities, towns, and municipalities aside from Belleville, as was pointed out earlier. And it also greatly concerns me when the reports we receive from him are riddled with sloppy errors, such as referring to Belleville as a township and not a city. Given the amount of taxpayer dollars that are charged by Mr. Fleming on an hourly basis to perform his duties, I think it is fair to expect that the reports we receive back from him are of the highest quality, show attention to detail. We deserve better than copy and paste or recycled paragraphs in a report, and we certainly deserve an Integrity Commissioner who proofreads their work. We also deserve an Integrity Commissioner who protects the privacy of those who file complaints, no matter who they are. Now, I have made clear that I believe any member of council who uses the Integrity Commissioner against another councillor does so purely for political gain. I pointed out how it disrespects both council and the taxpayers of Belleville, and is unnecessary because of other avenues councillors have to resolve issues or concerns. But, nevertheless, under current provincial legislation, it is permitted. This means the Integrity Commissioner has a duty to protect the identity of anyone who files a complaint. Mr. Fleming failed spectacularly in this regard by not protecting the confidentiality of Councillor Williams and his complaint against 3 other members of Council last year, which has started this whole thing. Mr. Fleming distributed documentation during his investigation containing clear and obvious information that identified Councillor Williams as the one who filed the complaint. This is quite simply inexcusable from an Integrity Commissioner. Then there are Mr. Fleming's attempts to circumvent the democratic process, to take away the will of the people, the votes of our citizens, and attempting to silence everyone around this table by directing this council in writing not to engage in any discussion about recommendations he makes in his reports. Everyone around this table should have serious concerns about an unelected individual hired by the city attempting to step beyond the powers they are given as an Integrity Commissioner and violate our charter rights. It is an exaggeration of the highest order for a lawyer, a member of the Ontario Law Society, to instruct this council to not only refrain from discussing any recommendations in his reports, but also to claim that members of this council should not have the right to participate in a discussion when they are the very subject. If we were to follow Mr. Fleming's written instructions, then Councillor Williams would have been unable to stand up at our last meeting and address the claims directed against him in the Integrity Commissioner's Hotelgate report. In what world would Councillor Millette, order. We all respected you. Councillor Millette. Councillor Millette. Councillor Millette, I've called you to order and you refused to, so you'll be asked to leave the meeting. Don't you usually ask for an apology? No, I called you to order multiple times. I asked you to come to order. You did not. I'm going to ask you to leave the meeting now. Councillor Millette, you'll be expected to give an apology before you resume the next meeting. Councillor Millette, order. Councillor McCaw. As I was saying, if we were to follow Mr. Fleming's written instructions, then Councillor Williams would have been unable to stand up at our last meeting and address the claims directed against him in the Integrity Commissioner's Hotelgate report. In what world would that be fair to Councillor Williams? What right does Mr. Fleming have to try and silence our elected officials to whom he can only advise on what we should do? The Integrity Commissioner's role is to investigate complaints and advise City Council so that we can assess the validity of any complaint and investigation, and then we decide what we should do next. He does not get to tell us what we can or cannot discuss. But when the Integrity Commissioner issues directives beyond the scope of their position, when they attempt to recklessly grab power from our citizens, when they provide not only incorrect advice, but also attempt to pass off their own opinions as the law, then what are we to do? Do we give up our authority as your council to weigh the facts and make a final decision, especially when his investigations are incomplete in the first place? Given how he has undertaken his duties so far, I fail to see how anyone around this table could have confidence in Mr. Fleming's ability to continue to perform his role objectively and correctly. An integrity commissioner who does not have the confidence of council is not and cannot be effective in their role. Lastly, there is the issue of Mr. Fleming's overall judgment in the conduct of his business activities. While acting as the appointed integrity commissioner for the city of Belleville, Mr. Fleming has also seen fit to act as legal representation for plaintiffs in cases against the city of Belleville. Several members of the public contacted me who were astounded that Mr. Fleming could be paid to represent the previous landowners of property just north of Maitland and Farnham Road roundabout at the local planning appeals tribunal, while at the same time being under contract to serve as the city's integrity commissioner. When council questioned Mr. Fleming's ability to work both sides of the fence, he provided technical reasons as to why he could do so. But just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. I think this shows remarkably poor judgment, particularly when we raised those concerns to him and he seemed oblivious to the perceptions. As a council, we don't always get it right. When it comes to Mr. Fleming as our integrity commissioner, this is clearly one of those cases. I do believe that when he was appointed, there was a great deal of hope that Mr. Fleming would be ideal in this role. But considering all the things I have just mentioned, I'm not sure how anyone could believe that he has been successful in doing so. I will be supporting the motion to terminate his services as our integrity commissioner. I'll just end by saying that I believe terminating Mr. Fleming's contract will allow us to move forward and find a new integrity commissioner who does impeccable work, pays attention to detail, protects privacy, understands their role, and won't place themselves in potential conflicts of interest. We need to hire an individual who will work to gain the confidence of all members of this and future councils, and who will restore the faith of the public in the intended role of the Integrity Commissioner for the City of Belleville. Councillor Sanderson, this is your motion. I will recognize you to speak, and then we'll call the question.
Thank you, Your Worship. A lot of comments around the table and pretty good discussion, I think. I did, unfortunately, I took some exception to some of the comments, but Councillor Millett's left, so I'll talk to him one-on-one. Councillor Thompson mentioned a couple times, it was a long time ago, but he mentioned a couple times that he had a motion on the floor. Well, he doesn't have a motion on the floor. The motion that's on the floor is to receive this report and terminate the services. So that's the motion that's on the floor. And for me, I should have mentioned at the onset that I was aware that we could terminate the contract without cost or penalty to the city. So my apologies for not stating that up front. I thought it was the right time to do it. It was his annual report, end of the year. We've received, he's been requested to investigate 8 investigations in total. One was withdrawn, and the other one had no merit to go forward. So really it boils down to 6 investigations. He completed 3 of them. We discussed his findings in this council, we debated them in this council, and we agreed in this council on what we were going to do. I supported all of those decisions. I didn't leave this meeting and then besmirch anybody that was part of the discussion. I didn't go on the radio and talk about my fellow councillors. So I want to also echo what Councillor Carr said. I have not and will not file a complaint with the Integrity Commissioner, okay? So I have not and will not. If I have a disagreement with a member around the table, what I do is I deal with them one-on-one. And so That's how I think we should deal with it. In terms of the emotion that was around the table, and I think Councillor Carr's word, some of the pontificating that was occurring, bravo. Far too much of it in my mind. This is a serious matter. We really need an integrity commissioner we can rely on, somebody that isn't going to bleed the city dry with exorbitant bills. I mentioned at the onset that I think we should try and structure a flat fee. I don't know what the number is, but if our bill is 60,000 and he's done 6, or he's only done 3 actually, because the other 3 are incomplete. If it's $20,000 per investigation, that's too rich for my blood. So something much more modest than that, I think, would be sufficient. I think that's the direction we need to go in, and that's why I think we should terminate our services with this guy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. So the motion on the floor is the amended motion.
Recorded vote, please.
Request for a recorded vote. Mr. McDonald, when you're ready.
Councillor McCaw?
For the amended motion?
Yes.
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 Councillor Sanderson?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
No.
Councillor Williams?
No.
Councillor Carr?
No.
Councillor Culhane?
Yes.
Councillor Kelly?
Yes.
Mayor Panchuk?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. We'll move on to Committee of the Whole. Motion to go into Committee of the Whole to hear and consider reports, passing of recommendations and resolutions with myself and the Chair. Get a motion to approve it. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Culhane. All in favor? It's carried. Reports. The agenda shall include under reports items that warrant individual attention from Council. And we'll start with 8A1, which is the supply and installation of transit bus shelters. The Manager of Transit Services report number MT 2020-05, and the resolution is that in accordance with Section 30.3, sole and single sourcing, approval and reporting of the City's purchasing bylaw number 2020-09, the quotation from Daytech Limited be accepted for the supply and installation of 13 accessible transit shelters in the amount of $76,120 plus $9,895.60 HST, for a total amount of $86,015.60, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to sign the acceptance agreement on behalf of the Corporation of the City of Belleville, and that the City Clerk be authorized to affix the corporate seal. Moved by Councillor McCaw, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. Discussion. Anyone have any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. 8A2, contract ENG 2020-20, active transportation path, Avonlow Road to Mahar Place, engineer and trainings report number ENG 2020-16, and the resolution is that the tender submission from 1549791 Ontario Incorporated, Al White Landscaping and Excavating, be accepted for contract number ENG 2020-20, active transportation path, Avonlow Road to Mahar Place in the amount of $672,402.50 plus $87,412.33 HST for a total amount of $759,814.83. This being the lowest cost tender received, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign the acceptance agreement on behalf of the Corporation of the City of Belleville, and that the City Clerk be authorized to affix the corporate seal, and that an allocation of $100,000 from the project budget for bike lanes, Bridge Street West to Loyalist College, issue number 14-1.104, be approved. Moved by Councillor Culhane, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Discussions or questions? Councillor Thompson.
I just want to speak in favor of it.
You can sit down. We're in the Committee of the Whole.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
I just want to speak in favor of the motion. Through the process of trying to get this bike lane in, there was some discussion one time of being going through Mahar Lane, then it was discussion to moving it to the next intersection. And because of some complications, we moved it back to Mahar Place. So I want to speak on behalf of Chad, who was the next door neighbor to it, and the other lady on the other side. I've spoke to Chad twice, and I want to commend the city for speaking to those residents, getting to the point where they're going to be happy with the bike lane going through. They're going to put up some fences, some shrubbery, and make it so that it's pleasant for those. So compliments to the residents, and it looks forward to having the bike lane go through. And then the Loyalist College also putting their forward their motion so to move ahead with theirs. So it's just nice to see this put to bed, and we can complete our bike lanes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Bove, I know that there was an announcement a few weeks ago. Loyalist College was going to complete this, which I think was a big part of it. And I see it's 100,000. Did they give an indication of when that's starting? Is it going to coincide with when we're doing work? Is it going to be ready for this fall, next spring? When would Loyalists be starting their portion?
Mr. Bove.
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, my understanding is they're ready to move forward right now. They have included this project on their property to connect up with this city project within this year's budget, and they're ready to move forward with it. And the sooner the better, I think, is the way they described the project to me. So,
fantastic. And I think I heard this from former Councillor Boyce before. Part of this whole project was to connect Loyalists to downtown, which it now does, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, yes. As part of this project, you'll note that the budget was approved many years ago, and it was a capital budget to create a pathway or a route system from downtown out to Loyalist, and various sections have been done. We have some en route sections of the path on Catherine Street, which will connect to the reconstructed footbridge. And certainly when Catherine Street moves forward to reconstruction, it will have bike lanes on it so that it's a completion of this vision from downtown at the Loyalist College.
That's great. I think it fulfills a major proponent or part of the transportation master plan. And I think that's great. If I can make a recommendation, probably through staff or through the mayor, when this gets completed, if we can do some a little bit of promotion on biking from Loyalist to downtown, I think that's good for downtown. I think it's good for Loyalist and the students that live there. Perhaps in the future, it would be also good for those that want to live in other parts of the city and can, for some part of the year, make their way to Loyalist there and back. I think that's fantastic. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this? Great. I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. 8A3, demolition of various buildings, 88 West Street and 664 Point Anne Lane. And this is the special projects manager's report number SPM 2020-02. And the resolution is that the 2020 capital budget be amended to add $250,000 of additional funding for the cost of demolition of the former Hillcrest School at 88 West Street for $235,000, funded from the Capital Levy Reserve Fund, and the residential structure at 664 Point Anne Lane for $15,000, funded from the Water Capital Reserve, and that the tender submission from Max North America Group, Inc. in the amount of $205,000 plus $26,650 HST for a total amount of $231,650 be accepted for the demolition work of both buildings, this being the lowest qualified quotation received, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign the acceptance agreement on behalf of the corporation of the city of Belleville, and that the city clerk be authorized to affix the corporate seal. Can I get it on the floor? Moved by Councillor Sandison, seconded by Councillor McCaw. Any discussion on this? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I don't know who brought the report, whether it's
It is Mr. Joel
Carbrant?
Carbrant, yeah. And Matt McDonald will be able to speak to it if you have a question.
Okay, just one question. When you look at the estimates, the one we're going to award for is $231,650, and the top bid was $859,472. Did we score this, or was it strictly on price?
Mr. McDonald.
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson, I can advise that Mr. Carbrandt scored the applications and the bids. I can also advise that Mr. Carbrandt was very happy with the turnout. He had very good turnout at the site visit and with bids. So lots of people with good experience, but a wide range of costs submitted.
So by scoring it, then, we know that we're dotting all the i's and crossing the t's, that we're not going to get something we're not expecting because of the price difference.
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson, Mr. Carbrandt is satisfied that we're getting good value for the dollar. He was very interested in the site visit and who attended. All of the folks who bid did, because the Hillcrest School in particular, the house in Point Anne is very straightforward. The former Hillcrest School is a significantly large building with multiple structures built in different times, and obviously we've had an environmental assessment done on that building for contaminated substances, so that was the concern. But Mr. Carbrandt is satisfied with the bid being recommended.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else on this? So this is good news. Last year we had, it was unfortunate the way things had worked out with the clearing of the land for the lawn bowling club in that community, and we had a number of residents that were kind of surprised, and I would say that we did not do a very good job in terms of communicating that out there. And when I was explaining to them that our long-term plans were to ensure that there would be additional recreational space on that site, they pointed out to me that we had not completed purchase of the Hillcrest School from the Hastings and Prince Edward School Board. Subsequent to then, Director Monteith was very helpful for us, and we were able to complete that, so that this property now is in our possession. Part of what we have to do is to demolish it, and then we will be going forward with a community consultation process to discover what people would like to have in that area and to discuss it. And so this is the next step along that road. For residents in the Hillcrest community that may be concerned, we would have liked to have gone earlier this year with that consultation process, and it has been impacted by COVID, but we are looking at starting that here shortly, and so that we can talk about the future use of that site and ensure that their opinions and their feedback is incorporated. So I'm excited, and I'm happy that we'll be able to get this going. With no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. So we'll move to consent items, where council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and council shall consider such items individually. I know that Councillor McCaw has a conflict on 8B1, and I have a conflict on 8B9. Does anyone else have anything they want to pull? Councillor Sanderson?
No, thank you.
Councillor Carr?
No, thank you.
Councillor Culhane? Councillor Kelly?
No, thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
No, thank you.
Councillor McCaw? Councillor Williams?
8B8.
8B8. So the following agenda items be approved with the exceptions of 8B1, 8B8, and 8B9. So the motion is on the floor, moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? It's carried. So let's deal with 8B1 first. Councillor McCaw, you have a conflict on this. And so it is a very long motion, but basically deals with redevelopment and amendments to the zoning bylaw for 135 Canafton Road. And so that is the small plaza at the corner of College Street East and Canafton Road. And Councillor Thompson has moved as read. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Seconded by Councillor Sanderson. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. So we'll move to 8B8. We'll get Councillor Sanderson or Councillor McCaw back in. Pretty sure Kelly. It's Millette. So after Millette is Sanderson. All right, 8B8, Jerkabago Food Truck Pop-Up, Manager of Economic and Strategic Initiatives, Report Number ECDEV 2020-24. And the resolution is that pursuant to the Manager of Economic and Strategic Initiatives, Report Number ECDEV 2020-24 regarding pop-up shops 2020, a bylaw to approve and authorize the execution of a license agreement with Seika Sheik and Joshua Blake operating the Jerkabago food truck be prepared for Council's consideration. Moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Kelly. My apologies if I mispronounced the name. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. And I think you have pronounced it right. Seika and Joshua are just an incredible addition to the pop-ups. If everyone's been to Jerkabago and Quinte West, it is one of their premier attractions, and I think we're very fortunate to have their interest in a vacant shop that was open that they can use. I was down there last week and speaking to staff and a lot of the operators, and they're having a phenomenal summer. I believe in the philosophy of abundance, that more is better, and I think that Jerkabago adding to already the food elements there will attract more people, and I think it's just for the remainder of the season. It's just going to be another great element of the successful pop-ups for 2020. So I'm full in favor of this. Congratulations to all involved, and hopefully we continue to see some great weather and the pop-ups busy.
Great. Anyone else on this? And so I echo Councillor Williams' comments. You know, at the Chamber of Commerce event to replace Canada Day to replace the Waterfront Festival. So the Chamber of Commerce event that replaced the Waterfront Festival, they called it Curbside Culture. Jerkabago was there, and I spoke to them, and I actually made a couple purchases from them, and it was delicious. And I had spoken to them about the fact that you know, if they would be interested in a container down at West Swix as part of our pop-ups, and I'm very happy to see that they've moved forward. I made some other suggestions to others that haven't come forward yet, but we're still working on them. But this is great to see, and I know that their food is of excellent quality, and it's great to have that additional Caribbean food from Jamaica, and I'm excited about the fact that they're going to have this new opportunity to introduce people in Belleville for their services. All in favor? It's carried. Councillor Millette is the Mayor of the Month, and so he is not here. Councillor Sanderson, I believe you're next in the line. So can I ask you to handle 8B9 as I have a conflict on that, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So 8B9 is municipal bylaw enforcement officers, request from the Quinte Mall. The resolution reads that a bylaw to appoint municipal bylaw enforcement officers for the property known as Quinte Mall be prepared for council's consideration. If I can have a mover. Councillor McCaw, seconded by Councillor Cohane. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carries.
All right, we'll move to council information matters, where council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and council shall consider such items individually. I'll start with Councillor Williams.
No, thank you.
Councillor McCaw. No, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
No, thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
No, thank you.
Councillor Culhane. No, thank you. Councillor Carr.
No, thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
No, thank you.
And so the following agenda items be received. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor, it's carried. A motion to rise and report, moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor McCaw. All in favor, it's carried. So we'll deal with bylaws. If I'm gonna ask Councillor Sanderson if you could deal with bylaws number 2020-148 and 155. And Councillor McCaw and I will excuse ourselves. If you can do first, second, and third reading on those two, and then we can handle the rest.
So first reading of bylaw 2020-148, a bylaw amending zoning bylaw number 10245, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and the height, bulk, location, size, floor area, spacing, character, and use of buildings at 135 Canifton Road. Have a mover? Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Cohane. All in favor? Carries. Second reading of 2020-148, a bylaw amending zoning bylaw number 10245, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and the height, bulk, location, size, floor area, spacing, character, and use of the buildings, 135 Canafton Road. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Carr. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carries. Third reading of bylaw 2020-148, a bylaw amending zoning bylaw number 10245, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and the height, bulk, location, size, floor area, spacing, character, and use of buildings, 135 Canafton Road. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? Carries. Moving on to first reading of bylaw 2020-155, a bylaw to appoint municipal bylaw enforcement officers for the purpose of enforcing bylaw number 9457 and Part 3, Section 3, parking of vehicles on private property, and Section 6, handicap parking zones, of bylaw number 12967, as they affect the areas of land and premises known as Quinty Mole, 390 North Front Street, 100 Bell Boulevard, and 190 Bell Boulevard. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carries. Second reading of bylaw 2020-155, a bylaw to appoint municipal bylaw enforcement officers for the purpose of enforcing bylaw number 9457 and Part 3, Section 3, parking of vehicles on private property, and Section 6, handicap parking zones, of bylaw number 12967, as they affect the areas of land and premises known as Quinty Mole, 390 North Front Street, 100 Bell Boulevard, and 190 Bell Boulevard. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Cohane. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carries. Third reading of bylaw 2020-155, a bylaw to appoint municipal bylaw enforcement officers for the purpose of enforcing bylaw number 9457 and Part 3, Section 3, parking of vehicles on private property, and Section 6, handicap parking zones, of bylaw number 12967, as they affect the areas of land and premises known as Quinty Mole, 390 North Front Street, 100 Bell Boulevard, and 190 Bell Boulevard. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? Carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. So I do the rest of them. So first reading of bylaw number 2020-147, 149, 150, 151, 152, 153, 154, 156. Can I get a motion to approve them? Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All in favor. Second reading of bylaws number 2020-147, 149, 150, 151, 152, 153, 154, and 156. Moved by Councillor McCaw, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. Any discussion on any of those bylaws? Seeing none, all in favor, it's carried. And third and final reading of bylaws number 2020-147, 149, 150, 151, 152, 153, 154, and 156. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Culhane. All in favor, it's carried. New business. Let's just give me a second and I'll recognize you. All right. I'm happy to announce that the City of Belleville will be extending free transit services through to the end of September 2020. Being able to extend this free service to our residents is something we're very proud of and truly hope it's helping to make a positive financial impact to those that need it during these challenging times. I would like to remind everyone who is riding the bus that masks are to be worn at all times while on the bus. City staff have been amazing in helping us to take the pressure off residents and businesses during these unprecedented times. Many have cooperated and have been redeployed to different departments and have been doing different jobs, and we thank them very much for their cooperation. Now that we are permitted to reactivate certain services at the Quinte Sports and Wellness Center, we have been working on a recall process that can allow us to add limited additional services while continuing to provide the current services we reactivated earlier this spring and summer. I am pleased to announce that staff at the Quinte Sports and Wellness Center will begin making ice on September the 1st, with one arena, the Wally Dever Arena, opening on September the 14th. And bookings are already resuming for that time, effective today. Depending on how the start of school goes and local case counts in our community, we are working to see a second ice pad along with the pool open by the end of September. Again, I want to stress that this will depend on our local COVID-19 case counts in our community. This news is very exciting for many in our community who have been patiently waiting to get back on the ice and back into the pool. For the month of September, and potentially for the month of October, but for the month of September for sure, ice time will be prioritized for youth programming. We'll continue to open up additional services and programming as resources allow, and keeping in mind safety protocols and other regulations. Thank you to all of our staff involved, and I ask that our user groups continue to use patience and cooperation. We've never done this before, and we're working through it as best we can. Additionally, I am happy to announce that effective August the 1st, the City of Belleville is able to take bookings for outdoor events that fit into the provincial criteria of 100 people maximum gathered outside. I look forward to seeing outdoor events resuming, and as it pertains to indoor events, we are still waiting to open those bookings, and we hope to have news on this soon. And I stress that even the outdoor bookings are dependent upon us having the resources able to support them being done properly and safely. Good luck to Rick Somerville and the Quinte Fishing Series, who were the first organization to receive consideration for an August event. We look forward to their completing their plans for a safe fishing tournament. We must remember that, as I said, this is also only as resources allow us in providing these services. So again, I stress the need for cooperation and patience. We're working together to get through this COVID-19 event, and we need everyone's cooperation. My colleagues, new business. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. Just with the 2021 capital budget upcoming, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but I'm going to throw these out here for staff to at least put on the budget for council consideration, include some cost financial analysis, and I recognize that some of these may be multi-year plans. Number one, Sydney Street reconstruction, Millennium to Farnham. Mudcat Road reconstruction, Ashley Street East to the reconstruction that was completed a couple years ago. Old Highway 2 between Hague to Point Anne Lane. Point Anne Lane, the concrete portion, and there's some new technology to remove some of that concrete out there. And also implementation of a coin-operated public bulk water station. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for new business? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you. I know on June, I think it was the end of June, I think it was June 8th, seems like about 3 years ago, I made a request just to the Inclusion Committee, just an update on our inclusion practices and best practices and discrimination. I'm just wondering if, through the chair of the committee, if you could just update when inclusion is meeting next and if that's going to be on the next agenda?
That information was forwarded to the committee.
Okay.
So,
can I ask the chair then when the next meeting will be?
No. So.
Oh, I can't. Okay. I'll ask on email. Thank you.
Anyone else for new business? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to piggyback on Councillor Carr's list. It's certainly a list that we hear frequently from the residents, but I also want to put in a pitch for Parks Drive. That's the orphaned road that runs from Millennium and snakes its way around and joins up to Maitland. We've done a lot of great work in that area with Millennium and with Maitland, and we're starting up Farnham. But we really need to examine Parks Drive as well. There's no lighting. The road appears to be in questionable condition, so if we could just have staff take a look at that as well, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Anyone else? Councillor Culhane, new business.
Thank you, Worship. I have two things. In the face of ever-increasing complaints about discarded and non-tagged garbage bags, I've had several occasions to contact Manager Reid, and I just want to thank him and his staff for their prompt response. The people are delighted with the service. And the second thing is, I seem to be representing a growing number of white-haired people who are entering a section of disenfranchised people because they're not computer literate. I went to Service Ontario as a white-haired senior with a mask on, not to set them up for failure, but to see how my request would be met. And I asked, I was quite capable of doing the task, but I asked for assistance, and I was told that they don't give assistance, that I was quite welcome to go away and find someone who was computer literate and bring them back. And I think that speaks to a large number of people in the community who may not have any idea where to proceed or how to proceed. And I'm not offering full computer service by any means, but I encourage people to reach out to us and ask if they're having issues. We represent all of the community, and I'm sure all of us would be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culhane. Anyone else? Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, just sort of following up on Councillor Culhane's statement about picking up garbage bags. Is it in are we able as a municipality, when we go out to pick those garbage bags up, are we allowed to put a fee to that residence for picking up their garbage with no tag on it? Yeah. Can we add that on their taxes? Because I got asked that the other day. I'm sure Councillor Culhane got called in the same one.
Yes, I
also,
did.
But it seems to be a consistent on this one location. And I got thinking after, you know, if we keep picking it up, then that person's never going to put a tag on it.
No, so bylaw enforcement handles that, Mr. Forrestal's department, and the property owner they issue an order for them to clean up, and if the city has to remove it, then we can charge them for it. So we do that with a number of things, including garbage.
So if they put garbage bags out front and we go and pick them up?
Well, it typically doesn't happen so much with garbage bags as it does with
this is a
furniture, but
one
it
here.
deals with furniture sometimes where people have left out or large items and they have not purchased the tags and they just left them there. Bylaw enforcement would go there. They would speak to the property owner and they would tell them that you can't leave your garbage out without a tag. Once the pickup day is gone, they have to remove it from the curb. If we have to go in and clean up that garbage, we can charge the property owner.
But what's happening in one specific system, I'm sure another one's, Councillor Culhane may, but we get garbage collected on Fridays. So on Friday night at 5 o'clock, garbage is done picking up. This garbage isn't picked up. So they call either Pat or somebody else on council. My garbage, or the neighbors call, garbage hasn't been picked up. We send a truck out, pick the garbage up, they get it for free. I'm concerned if this is a regular basis, that's a cost to the city of two guys going out with a truck and we're getting nothing.
Well, Mr. Reid is in the audience and I see him paying attention to your question. So one of the issues right now is we've just on August the 1st, we changed garbage companies. We also had, about $400,000 worth of free garbage services earlier this year during COVID, where we try to help residents, so we weren't collecting tags. So we're trying to get everybody back in the habit. But if people are abusing the situation, then Mr. Reid will ensure that it's dealt with appropriately, and we will not, again, we're not picking up garbage for free for some and others making them pay. We're treating everyone the same.
No, thank you very much. As long as it's brought forward, and Mr. Reid knows that's a big thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for new business? Seeing none, we'll move to motions, and I just need to consult with Mr. McDonald. Thank you. Just in consultation with Mr. McDonald, Councillor Thompson, would you withdraw your motion at this point now? I can certainly rule on whether it's in order, but I think it's a courtesy to give you the opportunity to withdraw it first.
Against my better wishes, let's put it that way first. I feel that this motion should have been presented. You've asked me a question to remove it. We've just finished dismissing Mr. Fleming from our employment as our Integrity Commissioner. So the value of this probably is of no value now, because there's no use putting it on the motion on the floor that Mr. Fleming, but I will stress that whoever we hire, that we bring that person in immediately for training, and anybody that has a question that has for Mr. Fleming, save that question for the new Integrity Commissioner, because we need an Integrity Commissioner. And so at this point, I will remove my motion.
Withdraw. Thank you very much. Number 12, notice of motions. Anyone have notice of motions? Seeing none, announcements. Anyone have any announcements they want to make tonight? Councillor Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just wanted to wish everybody at the Belleville Library all the best that opened today. I know Councillor Paul Carr is the chair, and Councillor Garnet Thompson is on the board. So good luck to Trevor and the team.
Excellent.
Great, thank you. Councillor McCaw, did I see your hand up for? No, Councillor Thompson?
No, that was exactly what I was going to say.
All right. Anyone else for any announcements?
Quick draw.
Okay, I have a couple here. First, I want to make a proclamation. Following the tragedy of mass murder in Nova Scotia earlier this spring, the City of Belleville lowered our flag to half-staff as we joined all Canadians in sharing our sympathy for our fellow citizens. Further to that sentiment, I would like to proclaim the week of August 14th to 21st as the Nova Scotia Strong Blood Donor Campaign Week in the City of Belleville. On October the 17th, a blood donation event will be held at the Fish and Game Club on Elmwood Drive from 1 to 7 p.m. I would encourage all citizens who can to visit the Fish and Game Club on August 17th to give blood. You must make your appointment in advance. To book your appointment, please visit www.blood.ca or by calling 1-888-2-DONATE. I was pleased last week to take part in the 100th class of the Dancing with Parkinson's group here at the Quinte Ballet School of Canada via Zoom meeting with Councillor Sanderson on August the 6th. I was the chair of the City Grant Committee when this program first approached the City of Belleville for support. It is wonderful to see how this has continued and grown, and the positive impact this has made for people who are dealing with Parkinson's disease. Congratulations and thank you to all involved, including the Quinte Ballet School of Canada, which is an absolute jewel here in our community and brings us so much positive recognition. Last week, we had the very exciting event of cutting the ribbon for the Bell Boulevard West Phase 1 completion. I was happy to be there with Councillors Carr, Councillors Culhane, and Councillor Sanderson. This is such good news for the City of Belleville. This is a great example of how each level of government working together can get things completed. We are a good 13 months ahead of schedule, having been exempt from the environmental assessment process, and it was so nice to have the Minister of the Environment with us because, as he meant comment to me, he usually sees these issues as they come across his desk as the Minister, but unless the event is occurring in his riding, he never gets to see the ribbon cutting. So the fact that he was here gave him great pleasure. He offered to be helpful for other processes for us in the future, and I promised him that we'll be in touch if we need that assistance. But I look forward to celebrating the completion of the next 2 phases as well. Last week, along with Councillors Carr, Culhane, Sanderson, Thompson, and Williams, we were able to accept Our Kids organization donation of $75,000 towards an accessible playground at the Field of Ability at the Parkdale Community Field. Later that day, we were able to open the Stanley Park on June the 30th, and the reinstallation of playground equipment to that park. Councillors Kelly, Sanderson, and Thompson joined me, and I made the comment about the importance of local government and how citizens who run and can get elected can see their impact. All of us have a number of projects around the table that we have advocated for and we've worked hard, and Stanley Park is one that took about 6 years to work through its way. And sometimes it made me feel like I was all alone in dealing with it, but to be able to see the park open last week was wonderful. The laughter of the children, their smiles were infectious, and it certainly was a good feeling. I want to thank the over 700 residents who filled the online survey, the folks that that were there for the opening, but also our city staff who worked through this whole COVID situation and have taken that step. In particular, Roland Cave, Brown Cave, for the work that they've done. Thank you all. A job well done. I attended a Zoom conference call last week with the OLG host municipalities. Great strides are being made to get the casinos back open in a safe manner in Ontario. We should expect an update shortly as this group of about 26 communities continues to work together on a safe reopening plan. We will have an additional call shortly, and I look forward to being able to make a positive announcement when the time is right and when conditions are correct. The Hampton Inn and Suites by Hilton has opened their doors for business on Bell Boulevard, and this is great news for the city of Belleville. The official grand opening will take place later this fall, and I look forward to taking part in that celebration. Blair Gamble is the general manager of this property, and he is a member of the city's Economic Development and Destinations Committee, representing the accommodation industry here in Belleville, and he and everyone else does a great job there. With that, I will call for a, I'm sorry, Councillor Thompson, you forgot something? Okay, go ahead.
Hey, Mayor, I know I'm not supposed to go when you're finished, but this is a couple of announcements. I just want to compliment the Downtown DBIA for all the excitement that's been created downtown since the opening of the display down there. The couple of the businesses, 3 of them having music at night. I've never honestly seen so many people downtown on a Friday night, and that's a compliment to the downtown for what the work they've done and attracting and getting us back to normal, if there is such a thing as a normal, after the COVID. And the second announcement is more of a personal one. I want to say that our first great-grandson turned 1 year old a week ago. So,
congratulations.
Thanks.
It's wonderful news. All right, now we'll move to item number 14, a confirmatory bylaw. That bylaw number 2020-157, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on August the 10th, 2020, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 10th day of August, 2020. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor McCaw. All in favor. Motion's carried. Thank you, everybody. A reminder, we do not have a meeting on August the 24th. The next meeting of council will be on September the 14th. Thank you.